Welcome to this edition of Robert Reads for November 2024. We're going to take a look at the work of Romantic era poet William Blake. William Blake was born on November 28th in 1757 in London, and he was a poet, a painter, and a printmaker, most distinctly known for his visionary art and a lot of his radical ideas, at least at the time. They set him apart from his contemporaries. Though he was largely unrecognized during his lifetime, he is now very much recognized, if not celebrated, as one of the most influential figures of the Romantic movement itself. He grew up in a modest family, but early on displayed artistic talent, and he was apprenticed to an engraver, which greatly influenced his style. He was deeply, deeply spiritual, and he developed a unique mythology and worldview, combining Christian themes with mystical imagery and often challenging the doctrines of organized religion of the day. His poetry is also characterized by its symbolic and often revolutionary content. Now, his primary collections are broken into two pieces or two publishing. One was called Songs of Innocence in 1789, and the second was Songs of Experience. Again, you can see from the language there's a bit of contrast, and that was published 5 years later in 1794. And in this, it embodied his vision of duality and the contrast of innocence with the corruption of life experience. In Songs of Innocence, he explored themes of purity and joy, and they often reflected a childlike perspective of the world. On the other hand, and by contrast, of course, Songs of Experience, while they started to address the darker, more adult, let's just say abstract, complex themes, some topics on social injustice, institutional corruption, and human suffering, which he saw plenty of. And we'll touch on that a little bit in the piece London uh, coming right up. Uh, a lot of his famous poems, like Tiger, Tiger, or it's known as The Tiger, but everyone remembers the first line, Tiger, Tiger, burning bright. They illustrated his intense engagement with the issues of his time, from the exploitation brought on by industrialization to the failures of organized religion. And his work underscored his belief in the power of imagination and spiritual truth over, say, constraints that were put upon people by society. Now, if you recall, he was apprenticed as an engraver, and it really helped him to develop skills that produced in him to be a gifted artist. And he used those skills to create illuminated manuscripts that he emerged with his poetry, often with intricate illustrations. And this integration of visual and verbal art was unprecedented. One could say that the ekphrastic poetry movement possibly grew out of this. Anyway, his unique engraving technique, relief etching, allowed him to etch both text and images on a single plate, creating very vibrant, complex compositions. And each piece was hand colored, adding to its distinctiveness. And these illuminated manuscripts, like, for example, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, well, they combined his visionary ideas with his artistic talents. And he presented these to his audience with a pretty much trying to combine these two mediums of words and imagery to represent his philosophical and spiritual beliefs. Now, throughout his life, he was known for his unconventional views and very, very unorthodox religious beliefs. He rejected materialism. He was quite opposed to the rapid industrialization that had occurred in England in his lifetime, and he was very uncomfortable with the very rigid structures of the Church of England itself, and he favored a more mystical interpretation of Christianity. His visionary experiences, which he claimed were divine encounters, they certainly shaped his art and his poetry, and though these beliefs often alienated him from mainstream society, it was in his later years that his work became explicitly a bit more apocalyptic, envisioning a new world purified of greed and corruption. His radical beliefs and bold imagination drew admiration from some and a great deal of skepticism from others. And he remained steadfast in all of this until his death in 1827. Now, today, William Blake is considered a quintessential romantic poet, as well as artist whose work bridged the gap between reality and the spiritual. His influence can be seen in various modern art and literary movements, with artists and writers drawing a great deal of inspiration from his emphasis on individual vision, emotion, imagination. His legacy endures to this day through that powerful imagery and much of the poetry, which I personally find somewhat hauntingly beautiful, for lack of a better term. They continue to inspire and provoke, and they underscored his belief that true enlightenment lies in the union of art, spirituality, and personal freedom. London by William Blake is one of those pieces that can be read on multiple levels. Um, it is certainly read in a first person narrative, which was not unusual for poetry at the time, but he uses that first person narrative to create placing himself within a scene, to empathize both the empathy and personal witness to what he's experiencing. And it goes beyond to just what he sees, it's what he feels. He calls this wandering speaker's detached yet observant voice. It allows him almost to be almost like a spirit himself, that to critique the scene with an intimate and slightly accusatory tone, as if he is both within and outside the constraints of the society he lived in. It was certainly written in a period of rapid industrialization of English London at that time, and there was such a sharp division over some of the matters and the impact of society that it created a series of very radical thoughts about what to do in the face of this. And he wasn't what you might call a Luddite, and that's a topic for another time. But he certainly saw the dehumanizing and exploitive effect of rapid industrialization on English society and its people. One could read into it an early critique of capitalism, if you will, and that profit was stomping through what should have been a more humane approach to work and living. It's a very powerful poem, and it obliquely critiques a range of very oppressive forces, from government and industry to religion itself. I chose it because it seems to be somewhat emblematic and encompasses a lot of what he expressed in his lifetime. London by William Blake. I wandered through each chartered street where the chartered Thames does flow, a mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every band, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appals, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. And most through midnight straits I hear how the youthful harlots curse, blast the newborn infant's tear, and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. William Blake, London. That wraps up this edition of Robert Reads, where we took a look at the work of William Blake, his piece London, and learned a little bit more about his life and work. Anyway, also a big thank you for the L. Brown Library for allowing us to continue to do our taping here at the L. Brown Library in Long Branch. Notice those who would be interested, the main library will be reopening, it looks like in the December timeframe, and it will have restored itself to its original Carnegie design. Also a big thank you for all those who came out in October for our spoken word program, Verses in Autumn. It was a great success, and a big thank you. We have plenty prepared for 2025 coming up. and we'll learn more about that in a future newsletter as well as Robert reads. In the meantime, enjoy the November season, and we'll see you in December.